Alexander the Great, or, if you're Persian, Alexander the Accursed. He was a bolt of lightning in human history, blazing across Asia to topple the Persian Empire. He spread the Greek language and culture across the world, inspired countless future conquerors, and created an empire that stretched from Albania to India. But where did Alexander come from? Where did he grow up? And what's left of it today? Hi everyone, this is Travels with an Archaeologist. I'm the Archaeologist, now let's get into the travels. Today we're in Pella, and it's this city where Alexander the Great was born and acted as his first capital. Pella is a unique visit where most of the 4th century BCE architecture can still be seen, and it makes it an archaeologist's dream. Unlike other great imperial capitals such as Constantinople, Chang'an, or even Athens, ancient Pella is completely abandoned. That's right, there's no modern settlement over this ancient one, unless you count the museum and tiny village of the same name that sits well outside the ancient site. The story of Pella, like that of its most famous son, is like lightning, short, bright, and intimidating. Alexander the Great was not a Greek. Both Alexander and modern Greeks might disagree, but the ancient Greeks that Alexander and his kingdom so emulated did not consider Alexander or his people to be Greek. Instead, they were Macedonian. Today, the largest city in ancient Macedon is Thessaloniki, with Pella city in easy reach of it lying in the countryside of northern Greece. And, unlike other incredible cities of ancient wonder like Rhodes, Athens, and Delphi, this city looks relatively neglected with little construction. To be honest though, I kind of prefer it. It means that most of what you'll see here is original, the same stone that Alexander and his people would have been looking at. But in another way, it's quite sad because it does mean that the grandeur of this city is no longer visible. Hopefully, I can change that and you can see it through an archaeologist's eyes. So, let's get into its history. Macedon's history goes back to roughly the 9th century BCE. However, archaeology from Pella has trace amounts of finds from the Bronze Age. We don't know when exactly Pella became the capital of Macedon, but it was probably less than a century before Alexander's birth. The original Macedonian capital was Vergina, where the kings were still being buried, but under either the reign of Archelaus or Amyntas III, this switched to Pella, designed to be a grand imperial Hellenistic capital. Now, Macedon, again, this is important to know, was not Greek. The Macedonian kings had been part of the Greek sphere of influence, and through various times wanted to be Greek, but the proper Greeks of the south just didn't agree and left them out of Greek-only activities, in particular the Olympics. There was actually a rival to the Olympics put in Pella, and this was because Macedon disagreed. It followed the Greek culture and seems to have spoken the Greek language as well. It was this desire to be part of the Greek or Hellenic world, but culturally outside of it, that birthed the term Hellenistic. That is to say, they were not Hellenic, but they were Hellen-ish. Indeed, as hard as it is for us in the modern world to imagine, Alexander was considered a barbarian outsider by the true Greeks of Athens, Sparta, Sicily, and even Thessaly, just to Macedon's south. And when Alexander the Great began building his empire, he was considered a barbarian invader to the Greeks just as much as he was to the Persians. So how was Alexander able to build his empire? As usual, no empire is built on one man. Alexander's father, Philip II, was a key figure in Macedonian history and probably the first long-term Macedonian king to be born in Pella. In the beginning of the 4th century BCE, Macedon's throne had always been precarious as family members overthrew and assassinated each other, courted various southern Greek city-states for help, and fought off pretenders to the throne. Finally, when Philip's older brother was killed fighting the Illyrians, he took the throne for himself as King Philip II, deposing his infant nephew in the process. He then spent his time centralizing and stabilizing Macedon into a strong kingdom and, crucially, reforming the military into which his son would use to great effect. Philip, like many Macedonian kings, was incredibly pro-Greek. So, when he couldn't join the Greek world, he forced the Greek world to join him. In 338 BCE, Philip II marched south and seized southern Greece, incorporating all the major city-states except Sparta into a pro-Macedonian Corinthian league, which was little more than a Macedonian puppet. Then, using Persia's sack of Athens a century earlier as an excuse, he declared war on Persia. Yeah, that's correct. Athens was sacked by Persia 120 years ago and needed to be avenged by the man who just yesterday had crushed the armies and removed her independence. But the ancient world was all about avenging old slights, real or imagined. Philip II himself was assassinated in 336, leaving his son Alexander III on the throne. And the rest is history. He blitzed across Persia. Classical texts would have you believe that he was undefeated. However, while Alexander was indeed a gifted general, he was also a gifted propagandist. Alexander certainly faced his share of defeats, all historians now largely agree, but he simply didn't record them or else lied and recorded them as victories. His victory in India is especially in doubt. I could do a video essay debunking some of the myths we hold about Alexander the Great, but this video is supposed to be about Pella, and the fact remains when he left Pella to conquer Persia, he never returned. Upon his death in 323 BCE, Pella itself remained under the control of the core family, that being Alexander's half-brothers under the regency of his general Antipater. Antipater's son, Cassander, ruled Macedon outright, and it was under Cassander that Pella was greatly expanded. However, the years following Alexander's death were brutal and bloody. His generals, known as the diadochi, began to war against each other as Alexander's empire crumbled. It led to a half-century dispute known as the Wars of the Diadochi. By the 270s BCE, these conflicts had largely settled down, with three major empires gaining supremacy. The Ptolemies of Egypt, the Seleucids of Asia, and, for our purposes, the Antigonids in Pella itself. And having regained the city itself for about 40 years, it was Antigonus II, called Gonatas, who made the biggest impact on it. It was under Antigonus that the city reached the height of its power and influence, and it's this city which is what remains to be seen when you wander around it. Despite the fact the city was Alexander's birthplace and first capital, the general never really cared for it. His influence spread across Greece, Rome, Egypt, and Asia, and yet here in his home city not much influence remains. It was developed heavily as a capital by Philip II's predecessors, but did not experience much funding or building again until Antipater and the Antigonids 100 years later. As the capital of Antigonid Macedon, Pella ironically experienced a much larger flowering and expansion than it had as the capital of Alexander's transcontinental empire. The 3rd century BCE Golden Age is visible all around it. It's known especially for beautiful mosaics which were becoming increasingly popular and increasingly intricate in the Greek world. The Hellenistic era is widely considered the high point of mosaic art, arguably matched by the Byzantines. This deer hunt mosaic from the room of the House of the Abduction of Helen is the most famous piece from Pella, but this pebble mosaic in the Agora is truly unique, built for the first time using the size of pebbles rather than just the color. This third mosaic, the Mosaic of Dionysus from the House of Dionysus, and yes, the house got its name from the mosaic, is also notable among the classical art community. They all use unique construction that was not found elsewhere, as well as unique elements such as glass and semi-precious stones. It was a testament to elegance. These are nowhere near the only mosaics from Pella, but they are merely the most famous case studies for students of classical art. The palace itself is located on the highest point in the city, and trust me, it's easy to see. But the palace is mostly unexcavated, which means that most of what you'll see is the lower city, which is helpfully right next to the museum. It's built in a properly Hellenistic style, which is to say a style that was clearly taken from the Greeks of the south. However, there are notable differences. For one thing, the mosaics are far more common here and used in decoration. For another, each individual home had a water system. You can see traces of this water system all over before the Roman era. These public baths, complete with tubs, were built by Cassander at the end of the 4th century BCE. These are features more commonly found in Roman cities, yet it was here in Pella during the Hellenistic period, with some mosaics perhaps from Philip II's time. It was Macedon's unique take on Greek culture that the Romans emulated, and what spread the love of art and architectural form from Italy to India, rather than the pure Athenian influence that we would all usually think of. Of course, Athens did have an influence, but Pella's role on how it was altered and viewed across the known world has been forgotten, much like the city itself. Pella continued to act as the Antigonid capital until 167 BCE when, as you may have guessed, it was sacked and conquered after a war with Rome. From there, the city fell into a decline. An earthquake in the year 90 BCE seems to have finished off its time in prominence for good. The Roman capital of Macedonia moved to Thessaloniki, where it remains to this day. Drawn in by the port, the people and the economy soon moved there as well. Thessaloniki became the great medieval center, at one point being the second largest city in the Byzantine Empire and among the largest cities in Europe overall. Thessaloniki did not even exist in Alexander's day. Rather, it was founded by Cassander, that same Cassander who embarked on a major build of Pella in 315 BCE. He named it after his wife, who was Alexander's half-sister. Thessaloniki outgrew its father city, however, and between the earthquakes and Thessaloniki's growth, Pella was gradually forgotten. The city became a small village, which in time became little more than a small military encampment under the Byzantines. Pella was never completely abandoned and still has some modern inhabitants in the nearby village, but its importance as a major urban center was lost. It was uncovered by excavations done in the later 19th century when a grand museum was built, but the site has never gotten the same sort of heritage funding available as the south of the country, which sees far more tourists. As a result, these ruins, relics of the 4th and 3rd centuries BCE, still sit unaltered, waiting for the eager explorer to experience this city with the same eyes as those whose inhabitants had once conquered the known world. Anyway, that's all for today. Thanks for making it to the end of the video. As usual, please remember to like and subscribe. You can donate to my Patreon by copying the link in the description. And until next time, I'm the Archaeologist, and this has been The Travels.